Hello, Board Game Shenanigans here. So this is a bit of a follow-up to my last video about Gloomhaven, and about 19 minutes in my last video, I went over this part of their campaign where they made this public service announcement, and from that I've been thinking about this since I recorded that video about how we is it better for us as a board gamer to separate the designer, the creators, the publishers of these games from the actual game itself. And it's kind of one of those, for most of the points there, it's like 50-50 really. There's positives and negatives of having the board game industry as it is, where it's easier to interact with the designers and interact with people who work on board games than other forms of media really. I mean, compare it to movies, TV shows, those sort of things. It's harder to interact with like a celebrity or the main faces of a movie or a film, or or a director as well, things like that. It's not as easy to interact with these people as it is with a board game designer. And by extension as well, similarly to video games are small as well, with the number of people who work on it and their popularity of the individuals involved in it. But overall, there is still a lot of different beast than board games, where it's much easier to find the sole creator of a board game on Twitter or on Board Game Geek or on YouTube, and drop them a message and say what you think about their work and things like that. It's very easy to find someone to interact with, even just some of the other people who work on games as well, not solely the designers. There's a lot of people involved in this, and even YouTubers are now more involved with companies and working with them and doing things like that. So I've just been thinking it over, and I guess that because it's such a narrow field of people that you could deal with a board game, then it's much easier to find them. So even if you go to like a convention and things like this, or a game shop, even like board game designers go to these places and they're the direct person telling you this is how you play the game, rather than someone hired to do it like you would in like a video game event. It's never Shigeru Miyamoto from Nintendo shows you how to play Mario. It's going to be someone who's been hired to do so. So again, it's a different beast altogether. Board games, you can find directly who's made that game and interact with them and get their thoughts on the world really, because you can directly interact with them much easier than other forms of media. So just to go with the far extreme as we get started here, I wanted to just pull up like an old article from the Washington Post, and this is about a board game that was made by an ex-convict who, as you can see, they'd gone into prison for some criminal offences that they'd committed, and then they designed their own game that people can play, and they're using it as a positive message to help the young kids growing up now who might be going down the road they did and commit crimes. So you can read this article at your own time, but overall I'm thinking this is like the most extreme example where someone is a criminal and they are a board game designer, and is that something you'd rather know or not know? And it could be the other way around. It could be someone is a board game designer, they make dozens of board games that you may or may not enjoy, and then they commit a heinous act in public, and that would completely sway your entire opinion of that person. Whereas this is the reverse of that. This is someone who's trying to get their life better after being in prison and trying to make amends for that, and using their own self to now make a game about it, which I would play this game if I met this person, give it a go, see how it goes. It seems like it's based around criminals and trying to avoid that sort of thing. He's trying to make a more of a positive impact on the world after the fact. So, that's a positive thing in the world. But if it was the other way around, if it was a big board game designer that now and they did something that you don't agree with morally, that could really affect your opinion of the game. So, from this, I kind of drafted a small list of different positives and negatives of why you could or shouldn't interact with designers, and what that means for like board gamers and board games, and why you might want to try and avoid it, or why it might be a good idea for you. So the first thing I listed was you can actually find someone who designs games, and you can see other games they design, and if you have that information, you can figure out that the games that they design are good for you, and they make consistently good games, and from that you're going to expand your knowledge of gaming and also the number of games you play, because you've found someone who is consistently making types of games you like. But with the downside of that is that sometimes you could be disappointed at that point, because just because the same person's made the game, it doesn't mean that they are really going to make a good game every single time. So buying based on the name value alone, that might not be enough, because it could still disappoint you in the end. The next would be, I guess, about the personal discussions and interactions you could have, and it's several points here. So you could find that a publisher or designer or just anyone who works on a game says something that you really agree with. They say something, they speak to your soul, and what they are speaking, it's nothing to do, it might not be anything to do with board games, but you might agree with it on a personal, political, or social level. But this can also be the reverse. Just because you might agree, other people are going to disagree. So you could be fine, you disagree with something someone says, and this is quite common in gaming, where people are very vocal about their beliefs, and this can happen on social media quite frequently. And I've seen it both ways, where people are going all after someone because of something they said and they dislike them, and they say you're not allowed to say certain things, and other times they rally behind someone and say, yeah, you're speaking truth to power, you are speaking what you should be saying, you are being brave and speaking out about something you believe in. So, and it all depends on what you believe yourself. It all depends on if you actually agree with what they said or not. So it's a complete 50-50 here. It's like, it could disappoint you and make you not want to support that person anymore in the games they make, or it could make you want to support them even more. So again, it's a mixed bag. It's not something that guarantees that the game's going to be a good game anymore. It doesn't mean that might not affect the game itself, but at the same time, it'll affect your perception of that game, because you've seen the way that person has been speaking and what they actually believe and what their beliefs that they say are. So next, this follows on from the last point. It is about the interactions you can have with a designer. So not just seeing what they say, it's also the interaction you could have possibly with a person who's involved with making a game. And with that, there is a positive there. You can give feedback, and they can ask questions. You can ask questions to them, and they can answer them and give you some. This is how you play the game. This is the rule. You might be playing that rule wrong, that sort of thing. So, which is quite a positive aspect of it. But then there's the negatives there. It could be in a feeling that you're attacking each other, and that can go either way. You could say something that upsets that designer or member of the team, or you could also they could say something to you that really upsets you and makes you feel, why did I interact with this person? They're not acting nice to me. They're not giving me what I thought I gave to them. They're giving me poor feedback. I only was just voicing my concerns or complaints about a game, and they're taking it personally. And board game people who are designing games can take it personally, because it's their game, it's their thing they've created. So they take the criticism much different than other forms of media, where it's a larger team and dozens of people making it. A board game could have just a handful of people, and then they'll take it a lot more personally than other forms of media. And you could have a general feeling that designer is like a jerk or narcissistic or other types of personality traits that you feel that aren't very positive to interact with, and that can ruin your opinion on a board game because you have taken the time to interact directly with someone who's made the game, but that's turned back and turned as a bad thing on you. So to move on to the next point, this could be a bit more aimed at people on YouTube, but also just in general, people who work a bit more closely with a board game designer and the team that makes board games, is that it could be a bad or a good thing in a way that as someone who is online and speaks to board game designers and interacts with them, helps them out with prototypes and things like that, they could get a friendship out of it and have good interactions and give direct feedback directly to a designer of a game and to help them make it and to work inside of a board game community and do things like support them on a Kickstarter with comment sections, give news updates, things like that. But then that can also do the negative side of it, lead to unprofessional conduct and handouts and things like this, where you're getting closer and closer to a game designer and a company to a point where you are just advertising the game, and you can't really give any honest opinion about that game anymore because you are so close and it could be disclosed or not. So that can give people a complete wrong perception of a game, and you could end up making a relationship which can end up turning unprofessional in the future. And as a next point to follow on from that, there's also, for the other people, the people on the outside seeing the way people are interacting as a designer online and talking to people, it could be a negative because you can be tricked by marketing slogans and a smiling face that's on a video saying, hey, get this game, it's amazing, and things like that. But, that it could just be all smoke and mirrors. They're tricking you into backing a game on Kickstarter or purchasing a game in the store that might not be that good, and it's just they've got good marketing and showing their face, and you seeing someone showing the game directly like that can really convince you differently than if it was just you go into a store and buy a box and see it, pull it off the shelf and take it to the counter and pay for it. It's a lot different when you're seeing some direct interaction from in a video or a stream or just in general anywhere online. It's much more convincing as a marketing strategy to go in and try and convince you with someone who's the face of the company. But the positive side of it is you can be advertised to personally. You can be someone who can interact with this person online, and you can have YouTubers who interview this designer or someone who works on the game and get a bit more a down-to-earth discussion about the game, which it's like the 50-50. It's always a give and take. There's some positives and some negatives to every side of dealing with people in board gaming. You don't know if it's going to be 100% positive or negative. It's all weighed based on how that particular interaction turns out. So the next point is it's more aimed at people who design and make games, but it's more about how they perceive complaints and criticism online. And that is about listening to the fans. And this in itself is a 50-50. And just to explain why, you can have a game that is that you feel as a designer is like the best thing you've ever made. It's your magnum opus. You don't think you'll ever make a game just as good as this one. And then you could have it could be very popular. You could sell a lot of copies, but if you have a few people online who complain about that game, it can change the game drastically, and you just trying to make everyone happy, you go in and say, no, I'm changing the game because these people have said that they didn't like this part of the game. And that's why listening to fans can be a 50-50. It doesn't mean that they were right. It doesn't mean that a minority was right. It could be the majority are happy with it. And you can see that with many games, really. There's many games that decide to change things up when they do a follow-up and things like that, or that, they think that, this change would fix the game. But, with the beauty with board games is a designer doesn't have to do that. And the reason why they don't have to is because a board game can easily be house ruled and changed by people. It doesn't need to be changed officially. It can be changed by anyone. So because of that, a designer doesn't really have to go and listen and say, I'm going to change all these things about a game, because that's not their job to do that. They've made the game with their vision in mind. They didn't need to go and change it because other people told them to. The next point, it kind of drags back into how the Gloomhaven situation was, where you saying something online as a company or as a member of a company, it can go either way. It can be a bad PR or a good PR, and it all depends on the perception of the audience. So personally, for me, from what I saw from the Gloomhaven campaign, that was an example of a bad PR move. That was a way to push more customers away from the game. But you could have other examples where a good PR example happens. And a good example I've come up with in my head would be like Oathsworn, where they decided they needed to raise prices for shipping, which obviously that would be a bad PR move if they just did it downright out of the blue. But the way that they advertised that and told people this is how we're going to do it and this is why we're doing it, it lessened the blow and ended up being a good PR move overall, and people were willing to spend more money on shipping. And on the flip side, you can see that with other games like from Mythic Games, where they have Rainbow Six Siege and they need to pay more shipping for that. The complete PR flip side of that was much worse, where them just saying, oh, you need to pay more shipping, that just ruined their the goodwill people had with them. They're like, oh, we have to pay more money and we still haven't got the game. That's all negative feelings people have. And again, it's like, because the more involved the designer might be with the game, that would fall down on the people who make it, and not like a corporate entity like a board game company. So if you mess up as a board game designer, then the PR will be on you as a person, and it might be due to a person causing that, be it bad PR or good PR. So again, it might be better off if a company is just a blank screen with a logo and it doesn't have any individual person's name attached to it, because if they do have people attached to it, that could be more negative, because what they say could affect the company, and also the actions that the company does could affect the people who work for that company, and that is a more dangerous of a way to manage the company. If people are understanding who the people behind it, it's going to it puts them more at risk from getting hate mail and things like that. So again, a PR incident, any either way, can really drastically affect the company. And overall, I think that it'd be better if the people weren't involved and it was more just based on a company situation, because people can be horrible on the internet. You don't want to deal with everyone who is coming at you with the pitchforks if you do something wrong. And this segues into the next point about how, when you are a designer online and people know who you are and know what games you make, then you can be held accountable for the games you make and the things you do, especially in how games are more on like Kickstarter online and things. You can, follow people up and say, hey, where's my game? You are the CEO or the head of this company and you can handle it and help me out and get this game to me because you are directly responsible for the game. And another positive would be that you can figure out which companies to avoid and which ones to support, because you know who the people are behind it, and it doesn't matter if there's a designer there who has done a million failures before, because you could figure that out because you know who that person is, because you can look them up and see their name and see that their name is attached to that particular like Kickstarter or that board game. But on the other hand, you could have the possibility of being a designer who ends up being entitled and feeling they need special treatment in what they do because they are the designer and they've been confirmed as the designer and people know who they are, and then they'll feel they need to be treated differently just because they are the ones who've been making the game. But it doesn't mean that they're always right and they make all the right decisions. They could be making a game that's not as good as people would want, or they could make changes to games that people don't agree with. So again, there's not 100% always good, always bad with all these things. It can be very 50-50. So then you can get to the next issue, which is what I did cover in the Gloomhaven video I made about gatekeeping, where there'll be times where people will say, we don't want this type of person to be playing our games, or we don't want this person to be interacting online. And as they would say in the Gloomhaven campaign, don't be a jerk, don't use this type of language or talk in a certain way, and that means we don't want to serve you, we're not going to give you service and things like that. So that sort of thing can be a negative, where it's just because someone's interacting in a certain way online, they take it as a way, don't buy this game, don't come here. And I've seen that with many times where you give criticism online, people might say, don't like it, don't play it, which it's kind of just saying, get lost. It's the gatekeeping mentality. Just because someone has a criticism to give about a game, they feel that they're not allowed to say that anymore, and then they need to be rushed out of the community because of what they say. And the positive side of this is you could know when you see this sort of thing that you can be someone who can vote with their wallet and take their money elsewhere. Because if you see someone acting in a certain way that you don't support, or acting in a way that is not welcoming to new players or people who have certain criticisms about a game, that can be a good thing, where you can identify when to, take your money and go somewhere else. And then you could also have points where, sometimes the gatekeeping could be a positive. There could be a certain person or type of people you don't want in your community. And, it could be a strong reason, like there's a very, is it a criminal? Is it someone who is a danger to the people around them when they play a game? Maybe at that point you could say and justify this person should not be allowed here and not be allowed to play games, or shouldn't be encourage their behavior and you shouldn't interact with them. But I think that it's not the majority of cases. I'd say there's a very small amount of times where there's someone who just shouldn't be around. I think that most of the time it's not justified the way people don't want to play with people. It could be something very trivial, and if that's the case, you need to try and avoid that yourself and say, no, we'll try and work things out, because it is usually something very minor and it is a board game. You can take out the outside world and other things and just enjoy the game and play it with the people that you want to play with. And then you can have a more of a kind of thought about it, where it could humanize the people who make the game. So you could see them as ordinary people, and the way that they present themselves and the way that they talk to people about the game. You're seeing like an honest person and seeing how they behave, and they're explaining the game to you through like maybe a YouTube video, or you can meet them in a convention or something, and then that means you know who the game is, and you can see if they're a genuine person who has genuine love for the game that they've made, and they can talk to you about it and that sort of thing. It humanizes the person, and I think that's a positive for actually having to know who someone who made the game was and seeing how they can talk to you about it. And I think that's a good positive for the industry. But then on the other side, sometimes people can idolize people who are games designers a lot more than they would a normal person, and just because they made games, then they're always talking about them, praising them, and I think they big them up more than they actually are. They're just a board game designer. They've not saved the world, but they've made a game that's all right, or multiple games that are good and things like that. But I think that you can't go too far in with it. They are just another person. Anyone can make a game, so you need to judge them as ordinary people. And I think that's where it's on the people who play games here. It's like you can humanize these people and talk to them like they're normal people, and because they are normal people. But I think that because when someone's a celebrity and board game people, they're not superstars, but they do have a personality and an online presence that can be judged as in the realm of being famous. So I think that you can't go too far in saying that they're amazing people, because you don't know most things about them. You just know that they make games, and I think you just need to judge them based on that. And finally, the general point you could really cover about why would you want to know who made the game? Is it good? Do you need to know? Could you just separate the game from the people who made it? And it's about whether you might think someone is a good person or a bad person. And honestly, does it change the world if you know that someone is good who makes a game? No, not really. I think that if someone's a positive person in the world, it didn't really matter to you about the game. They could be making this board game, but it doesn't mean that they need to know everything about them in the world if they were a good person and they did good things, because as you was playing the game, it didn't matter. But when you start knowing if someone is bad who've made a game, that can give you a much more negative impact on how you feel about a game, because it can completely change your perception of the way the game was, because you know who was behind it. And no matter what, if there's someone who commits something that's terrible in the world and they do things that you can't be forgiven for, it really changes your perception on whether what they did with their life and what they created is good. And you can see this in many examples in media and things like that, where there are people who did many good things in their lives, but then their entire reputation is tarnished at some point because it comes out that they've done something terrible once. And once that comes out, they can never come back from that. There's plenty of actors who've had this, plenty of directors in movies, and I think the same thing could happen with board games, where someone in board gaming has done something that people consider evil or wrong, and if that happens, then you can never forgive them, and then it'll tarnish their entire board game library. So if it went out where you had these board games and you didn't know who made them, you'd never have that risk, because it wouldn't matter who had it, because no one ever knew that they made it anyway. And I think that that's the key point, really. You have to try and separate the designer from the game, and having designers online talking about their games, it's encouraging more discussions on games and designers directly talking to the audience. And with that, it can bring more risks, as I've kind of covered in this video. So that's going to be a general ramble about this. I just covered some key points of what I thought about, and I just want to see if anyone has the same type of thoughts about how board gaming is online, and do they think that do you go out and talk to people and say, I liked your game, and talk to them directly? Because I have interacted with some people who make games online, and some seem like decent people, and they definitely have a good heart, and they're trying to do good and make people happy with the games they make. But overall, at one point, you never know if you find a disagreement with these people. Would they completely go after you? Would they attack you? Would they tell you you're wrong? Or would they take some criticism of the game too far, and they think that what you said was horrible and call you horrible people? Because some of these people do take it to social media and call out people personally because they've said something wrong to them and they don't agree with. And when that sort of thing happens, it's not very nice for the people who just said something, because it doesn't mean that they said it, because sometimes these are just text messages, and you can never judge a block of text the same way as someone vocalizing something and talking to it in person. It's not the same thing. So anyone can take something really bad online, like a criticism of their board game, because if someone says this game sucks, it's a very strong opinion, but it doesn't mean that they hate the people that made it, and it doesn't mean that the game isn't going to be, bad for everyone either. It's just an opinion. Someone stated it and they move on with their lives, but then people hold on to that who make the game, because they take it more personally than anyone else ever will. So that's about it for this video. Thank you very much if you've listened all the way through. Please subscribe, like, and share the video if you liked it, and also comment your own opinions. And do you think that people in board gaming should be, the designers, should they be interacting with people online? Should they be known to everyone, and what made what game and things like that? Just give me your general thoughts if you did like the video. Comment down below. Thanks for watching. Bye.